Hello everybody, we are so excited to be bringing you the technique we did on Reels on our Instagram account last week, the Troweled Impressed technique. It was a big hit and I guess 15 seconds wasn't enough to figure out how we were doing it. So we wanted to come on here today for our Technique Wednesday, and we moved from Technique Tuesday to Technique Wednesday. Seems to work better in our schedule. So we are going to be walking through this step by step for you guys, just talking a little bit about it, what it is, the tools that are best for this technique, and all the possibilities really, because the possibilities are endless with this technique. You can get a lot of different looks and we can talk about that as well. So that's just a little preview of what we'll be going over today. We have our coffee, hope you have your coffee too, and let's get creative. This is a very old, kind of a junky dresser. It has a lot of imperfections,
Needed
a lot
some
of
TLC.
the veneers kind of popping up in places. And so this technique actually is a good one for this dresser because, as you'll see, we're going to go on with a very thick coat of mineral based or chalk type paint. And that helps to hide and cover up some of those imperfections. Now, we just kind of pickled it with a coat of warm taupe. It's a warm taupe color.
Light taupe.
Because in our reels, we use some very vibrant colors, and today we wanted to show you what this technique looks like with some more soft neutrals and how you can get just a completely different look with this.
Yes.
So,
would you call this a kind of a floral, a damask look?
yes. So we're actually going to use the Troweled Impressed technique to create a damask, kind of lacy damask finish on this dresser. So it'll be very feminine yet very neutral, work with a lot of different interiors. So here is what we will be using today. Here are the supplies.
Now, before anybody asks, because inevitably we get people asking what color or brand of paint that is, we refer to our colors that we use in terms of a color, a descriptive,
Types.
like a soft white, a light taupe, because we use a lot, our stockists carry a variety of brands. We use many of them, and many, maybe most of the time, they end up being mixed and put in our dispenser bottle.
Yeah,
so,
and we don't want you guys to get distracted or caught up in the exact brand, because I know how I am. If I'm watching a tutorial, I will think I can't get the same look unless I have the exact same things. That's not true. So we don't want that to be a distraction. Any chalk type or mineral-based paint will work for this technique.
Exactly.
We're using some warm neutrals. This is a very neutral, warmish
Light,
gray.
warm gray.
So the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to lay a base coat of this white color right here. And this is really kind of a pure white. It's not warm, it's not cool, it's just kind of a pure
neutral
white.
Yeah.
And we're just going to lay this in. I'm squirting it right on the dresser. And then watch how Josie is paletting on, troweling on.
Now, when you get chunks, there's a chunk right there.
I hate chunks.
You'll get that out so that it doesn't make streaks. It's not a big deal. You just manage it by, if you don't, if you think you're going to have chunks in your paint, just manage it by pulling them out.
And as you're working in your paint, you'll get an immediate sense of whether it's the right thickness. The thickness is very critical for this technique. You will see later when we get to the impressed step,
yes, you'll
that
see why
you will
then.
get a different level of impression based on how thick your paint was. So you'll learn to pay more attention to that. You'll learn kind of what your preferences are with how thick you like it, but experiment with that. So this is just the first coat though, so we don't want to go too incredibly thick.
When we get, or the first color you mean?
The first color, right.
When we get this on, we're going to talk a bit about your setup time, your setup, the body of your paint. So the reason we go into these details is because the body of your paint, you're looking for structure in order to support the texture stamping you're going to do in it. So that structure can be the sum of a few different things. You're going to pay attention to setup time. You're going to pay attention to the thickness of the paint. You're going to look at it and say, okay, say you go in and it doesn't work, and I'm getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. You're going to say, okay, do I want to either let it go longer, set longer, or do I want to rework it, which is also an option. Let's go ahead and put some.
Okay, so now I'm just kind of laying in little kind of strips here, even amounts of the other two colors.
Yeah, that's probably, that's
too much?
No, I don't think it's too much, but we want to go like probably lighter on that one, I'm thinking.
Yeah, I'll just put a little bit of this.
Oops.
Sorry.
And then, Sal, do you want to get the other trowel?
Yeah.
Yeah. So now what we're doing is we're building some color play into our troweled layer, okay? It's subtle because the colors that we're choosing, unlike the TikTok or Instagram post that you guys had. And then get some, I tend to prefer moving in horizontal and vertical motions for the most part, maybe a little diagonal, but I don't want swirls. But that's kind of a me thing. I tend to get a little like, I don't prefer the look of swirls in the finish. And this is kind of, when Sally and I had a surface business, we did European style rustic finishes. We paid close attention to the shape in the color play that we were laying down because we didn't want swirlies. We didn't want anything inorganic that looked like you were, swirling color on. We like to make sure we really paid attention to that. So
okay, that's looking good actually. You got it done while I was washing my trowel.
I did.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
So we can. Actually,
that
we've got
looks
a pretty good view on it.
So you guys can imagine if we just take a minute here. We're gonna take a minute to let it set up like we talked about. And again,
it's 12:09.
In terms of setup time, the longer you have it set up, the different type of impression that you'll get.
Right. I actually need a little more over there. I see there's a spot that's not. There we go.
And you will see when we impress it how it picks up so differently in the areas that are thick as opposed to thin.
Yes.
And that's a good thing. That's actually really adds to the beautiful texture and variance in the overall finished look. But that is what we're looking at right now. So that's what we're doing.
Okay, so what you're wanting to do, what Sally was talking about is setup time and how important that is. That's going to give you your impression. So what you're going to do is you want to let this set up. Usually takes about 10 minutes max, but conditions are going to really play a big part in that. And you're going to learn what you like, the setup and the structure of your paint that you prefer as you do some practice.
You're making me nervous.
I won't touch it. So, okay, there. You're going to look in the light as it's setting up, and you're going to start looking for the areas that are thinner that start to mat up, okay? And those areas won't take as much of the impression, and that's okay. There's variation in the impression, but you can see the gloss of the wetness. That's going to start to mat up in the thinner areas.
And this is what we meant by, you can see with that thick laying on of paint, how you can really hide imperfections in a very old dresser that has some more goobles to it than others.
Yes. So here's a point I wanted to, while we're waiting for this to set up, different brands of the mineral paints have different bodies to begin with, right? Some are going to be thicker, some are going to be thinner. So talk to your stockists or just play with the brand that you love, that's your favorite, and you might find that, okay, mine doesn't get as much structure as quickly, or the window is shorter for that impression time. So I'm going to try reworking it. What reworking it would mean, so you've gotten this all laid out, and you've got really good surface exposure, which means dissipation, like the moisture is dissipating out, as well as, depending on the finish of the piece you went on, the substrate, pulling in, so it's thickening up. But you can kind of enhance or speed that up or thicken your paint by simply, I'm not going to do it, don't worry, simply taking it, gathering it back up, and then laying it back down. In a sense, you're mixing it on the surface. Whoever's done clay, like pottery, and has worked clay on the big plaster work surface, that pulls moisture out of it, and you're getting that same effect. You're getting the same effect here if you rework your paint. Rework. Yes, exactly. So even if you don't feel like you need to, sometime you might experiment with that for expediting the structure build in your paint. What you are looking for is not a perfectly clean impression the way you would get one when you're stamping with ink or paint. This is going to be a very textural, broken impression, and with the exception of the areas that are almost dry, those spots are going to give you a clean but shallower impression. So you're going to have a range there, and that range is part of what makes this technique shine. It's not perfect. It's not clear. It's mysterious. It's layered. It's broken color. So
it makes you just simply want to touch it. It is so textural and so dimensional. Okay, ready?
Okay, yes.
So what I'm doing is I am going off edge here. I like an off edge look to start with. And then once you lay it down softly and carefully.
Straight down, no shift.
Straight down, no shift. Now, your paint is thick. It is wet. It might shift. So be very careful to go straight down. Don't come at it from the sides. Go straight down and gently press. Okay?
Should these stamps be, what do you do?
Conditioned? We always condition our stamps. You don't have to for this. We do it for our mediums. This is not necessary, but you don't necessarily want a dedicated stamp for this technique, in which case you can absolutely use your conditioned stamps.
Okay, now the way you lift off is important here, guys. Again, you do not want to shift. Now remember what Josie said, this is not meant to get a perfect impression. Stay with us. It is amazing when it's all finished.
Hold on, let me, did you just shoo my hand off? You're using more pressure with this technique than you do when you are using a, using the stamp with like paint or ink.
Firm pressure.
Yeah, firm pressure.
You'll get used to that as you play and experiment. So you see, it is a very crude, broken
yes
finish. Oh, you know what I need is some wipies, because you want to keep your stamp clean as you go forward. I'm creating a repeat pattern. So what I'm doing is I'm flipping it so that I get a nice pretty repeat, and that it's random. So I'm kind of turning it and flipping it and going off edge. And when you do a repeat pattern, you want to butt it up nice and close to the piece next to it, so you don't have big gaps. If you do end up with a gap, you can go back in with your stamp and fill gaps. So it's not a big deal, but I just like to be careful of that. So nice and firm pressure. And again, we're going to lift. Now I want to work somewhat quickly because I don't want the paint to dry as I'm moving through the sides, okay?
So here's an awesome example of so this just happened to be thinner, and it was like almost dry right there, and then right by it, because this was a trowel mark, was thicker. And you can see the difference in the impression. Having said that, the really rustic areas of impression end up adding so much to the overall look. So like we said, you're going to have that range, and it's good. Embrace the range.
Now there's all different types of stamp designs, and the ones that we used before on the Reels clip was Bohemia, which works beautifully with this technique. And that one you would approach from a completely different way. Wait till you guys see this all finished. It's just gorgeous, like lace. It's so pretty. And again, you just want to run your hands over it. It's just, it keeps it from shifting. Okay.
Essentially, the idea is when you are troweling this onto the surface, and troweling gives you a more even, especially a silicone trowel, a flexible trowel, gives you a more even application. You have more control for the application. And then you're spreading it and you're allowing just the air dissipation, the water dissipating through to thicken your paint. If you need to take that up and amplify that thickening to gain that structure, you can rework it. And all that means is using that silicone spatula to gather it back up and lay it back down, and you're moving it over and you're getting that building structure. Most of the time that's not necessary. Simply waiting, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and checking your surface haze is going to be enough structure. We did not rework this. You guys saw. We laid it down, we let it set up. It's been 10-ish minutes, probably, maybe now 15.
This video started.
Okay, so we laid it down. We were probably 10 minutes into it. I'm telling you, you're going to want to touch it. Just run your fingers over it every time you pass it by, because it does. That sumptuous, silky waxness just really does play well with textural techniques.
Now, if you wanted to, you could go back and pull some of these stamps off of this. I'm using all of the stamps kept on the sheet. If you wanted to go back in and fill any areas, you could take them off the sheet and do that. I'm not going to do that because I think it's perfect just as is. Do you see any spots, Jose, that you would want to?
I don't, but I like a little bit of the open white space in between.
I do too. Oh, that is so pretty.
It is.
Guys.
Let me get back here and just try to get the best vantage point for you guys to see it.
It's so pretty.
So pretty. Yes, it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous.
So all I was doing, Annie was asking, all I was doing was taking this heap of paper towels and just wiping it off maybe every second time.
Yeah.
So that I kept the buildup and any chunks from drying. And
and what you don't want, and the reason why Sally does this too, is that those, the negative, the recesses, you don't want those to fill with paint because that's going to reduce the textural impact you have with it.
Right. And you guys, we will post a complete tutorial on YouTube that will show the waxing and any other finishes. You know how it is when you're working a piece, you actually want to keep going with it. So we might do other things. You never know with us. So
True.
Make sure you watch that YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel, just IOD on YouTube, we'll link below, and catch what we end up doing with this dresser. You'll get to see it all waxed and finished.
Yes.
And the beauty that is this technique.
Yes.
Oh, you know what I'd like to do? I'd like to show them this technique in these over here, Jose. Can you show them this dresser? Somebody asked how long would this take to dry. That really depends on the thickness of your paint as well as...
That's better.
As well as the conditions that you're in. So heat, humidity, all of that. But if you sit it under a fan maybe an hour, if it's in any kind of warmth, it just depends too on the paint you're using. There's too many variables to answer that question completely. So you guys can see the difference in the different types of stamps and the different colors that you're using. You can get a completely different look. Isn't that cool? This dresser was really kind of Bohemian Baja.
Yes. In fact, the colors remind me of some of the colors that Debbie uses a lot of Debbie's DIY. And fun, saturated, just We love it.
Okay, you guys, thank you for joining us. I hope that this helped and that you're going to get in there and play with your IOD stamps, because this technique can only be done with your IOD stamps, and it's a super fun technique to play with.
It is. Oh,
guys,
thank you, everyone.
We'll see you soon.
You're awesome.
Bye.